Hey everybody, what's going on? Hexlex here with another Master Duel video for you guys. Today in this one we're going to be covering a deck that we actually started playing, I believe it was the last season, or it might have been the end of Season 3. It was relatively recently, but with of course the addition of the DPE, good old Destroyer, Phoenix Enforcer. Well, like with all of our other decks, now we are coming through and upgrading, or updating, a little bit of both really, our Phantom Knight deck here. It's been a little while since I've gotten back to playing Phantom Knights. It's, you know, with all this new stuff coming out, of course, it's like a lot of decks kind of got pushed back a little bit, but this is one that I've been meaning to come back to for quite a while, and I was actually really glad to come revisit it because we're able to not only add Destroyer, Phoenix Enforcer, but with it we can add another nice little tool in Artifact Scythe. This is a card that I've talked about interacting with Destroyer, Phoenix Enforcer before, but we haven't really seen much in action. It seems that Scythe isn't quite as prevalent as maybe some people, honestly myself included, thought it would be. I thought we'd be seeing more Scythe DPE interaction running around, but it turns out, because, you know, you have to play the artifact Dagda as well in the extra deck, and it turns out that that one extra deck slot is actually a bit much for some decks to include. Now, there is also, what is it called again? Is it Sanctum? Yes, there's also Artifact Sanctum you could use instead of Dagda. Some people do play like 2 or 3 of these instead to get Scythe, but I mean, not only is it obviously more ultras to craft, but I think the main deck slots are about as big of an ask as the extra deck slot. But Phantom Knights I found was a deck where I could squeeze in the room in the extra deck for the Dagda here. Dagda having fairly generic requirements and a relatively easy to activate ability that will allow you to just search your Artifact Scythe. And the other nice thing is that you can then use Dagda as a link material to go into Vert, to then go into DPE. And then obviously the idea is that on your opponent's turn, you blow this up while it's face down, you special summon it, and then you extra deck block your opponent for the turn. So it's kind of like the Buster Dragon of Phantom Knights here. You know, if you're comparing it to Adamantipator in that way. Now, like I said, it hasn't been quite as prevalent as I thought it would be, but that doesn't mean it's not a good play, you know, and it just adds to the many, like, already ridiculous things this deck can do, right? We did take out the F-Zeros, so we're not using those anymore, but I think that's totally fine in order to make room for, you know, the DPE engine and whatnot. And since we took out the F-Zeros, I also dropped one of the 2 Leviers. We definitely really still like to have a Levier there. Levier, though, it's just a really good effect. It's a nice extender, and it's a really easy way to activate Dagda's ability, because you do have to activate a card on the field in order to get the Scythe Search, which sometimes is a little bit more tricky than it sounds, depending on your setup. But Levier is a really easy monster to go into that you can just, you know, play, or you summon it, activate its effect, and then that'll trigger your Dagda. And then from there, it's really easy to link into Vert, like I mentioned. So, all right, let's go ahead and run through the deck list here, and then I have, of course, as always, some games for us to take a look at as well. So we've got 3 Maxx, 3 Tour Guide from the Underworld, 1 Graff, Malbrance of the Burning Abyss, 1 Seer, Malbrance from the Burning Abyss, 2 the Phantom Knights of Ancient Cloak, 3 the Phantom Knights of Silent Boot, 1 the Phantom Knights of Ragged Gloves, 3 Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, 2 Danger, Jackalope, 2 Danger, Tsuchinoko, 1 Psychic Wheeleder, 1 Psychic Tracker, 1 of the Phantom Knights of Stained Greaves, 2 the Phantom Knights of Torn Scales, 1 Destiny Hero Celestial, 1 Artifact Scythe, 1 Destiny Hero Dasher, 1 Reinforcement of the Army, 2 Fusion Destiny, 2 Emergency Teleport, 2 Call by the Grave, 1 Phantom Knight's Wing, 1 the Phantom Knights of Shade Brigandine, and 2 Phantom Knights Fogblade. Now down here in the extra deck, we've got 1 Destiny Hero Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer, 1 Levier the Sea Dragon, excuse me, 2 the Phantom Knights of Breaksword, 1 number 75 Bamboozling Gossip Shadow, 1 number 86 Heroic Champion Rhongo, 1 Raiders Knight, 1 Arc Rebellion Xyz Dragon, 1 Divine Arsenal Zeus Sky Thunder, 1 Cherubini Ebon Angel of the Burning Abyss, 1 Artifact Dagda, 1 Predaplant Vert Anaconda, 1 the Phantom Knights of Rusty Bardish, 1 Appaloosa Bow of the Goddess, and then finally, of course, good old access code Talker. Of course, there is also the, excuse me, the kind of elephant in the room that this card is now at 2. So I've supplemented with a 3rd copy of Tour Guide. I think I actually added this I don't actually quite remember when I added this, but I don't think I've been playing it for very long here on the channel, so that was a pretty easy swap for me because I was just playing 2 tour guide before. So when this went to 2, I just, you know, dropped the 3rd torn scale and put in the 3rd tour guide. Tour guide also especially good right now because, especially with this build in particular, because believe it or not, tour guide by itself can actually end you with a DPE plus Scythe setup. And in what should be tomorrow's video, if I'm planning this out right, in tomorrow's video, we're actually going to see that combo, because tomorrow's video is going to be our Phantom Knights combo guide. I've been wanting to put that out along with the Prank Kids combo guide for quite a while right now, so I wanted to make time this season to do that. It's a bit later than I wanted. It's funny, with the new set coming out, you know, unannounced, it actually, I've talked about this a bit before, but one of the videos I had lined up was going to be this combo guide, and it was going to come out in like the first half of the season, but yeah, then we had a whole bunch of new stuff to cover, which is really cool. But yeah, we managed to get back to Phantom Knights here, and of course with the updates, like I mentioned earlier, came an upgrade for the deck. So I think that's about all I've got to say about the deck at this point. We've got some pretty good games to watch here. There's one in particular I'm thinking of that I'm really eager to get to, so let's go ahead and jump right into some games. Alright, so our first opponent here is going to be a Rose Tenyi deck, which is actually a deck I'm thinking I'm about to build myself. Not because I have a particular interest in it, but I happen to have pretty much everything for it, so why not? Opponent's going to take the first turn here. We do have a Maxx, which is always really nice to see. They're going to lead with their, you know, Ascendant of Thunder here, which I'd never seen this card. It's pretty neat. And then follow up with a teleport. Of course, we're going to chain Maxx to the teleport there. And they're summoning a Punk card. I've seen a lot of decks use these this Punk engine here, so I've seen some comments suggesting to maybe using some of my decks as well, so I may have to look more into that. Of course, 3+7, we know what this means, right? That means Baron de Fleur comes down. So, you know, permanently give us 1 draw and manage to end on an Omni Negate. That's pretty good. They're going to drop Maxx right away at the start of the turn. I generally don't think that's a good idea. I think you should wait until at least you have some what of an idea of what your opponent is doing before you just blind drop Maxx. And I know if I had blind drop Maxx, I would have gotten an extra draw, but it still doesn't feel right, because it's still really easy for your opponent to just end and like plan their turn around the Maxx if they already know it's established before they begin their plays. And then that way you're just losing card advantage. I know the game is not quite as much about card advantage as it used to be, but I do still think it's a very important factor to the game. So, yeah, so we do end up getting locked under Maxx, or not locked, but we are under Maxx ourselves this turn because Baron de Fleur did negate our called by there. But with minimum investment, I can still go into DPE here and go ahead and pop my opponent's Baron, battle for some damage. And then, of course, I've got the Artifact Scythe here. So now I have a Scythe lock set up, and we gave our opponent, I think, what, 2 draws there? Okay, I'm going to let my opponent's teleport resolve here. I'm going to wait a little bit, let them get some resources on board. Look for something good to pop maybe before I can, you know, before I just, you know, pop off the Scythe here. You could on the draw phase if you wanted to pop like the DPE and the Scythe, but I generally like to wait because it's really good. It's really good to get the opponent's monster and then get the Scythe off as well. It's like I was about to mention earlier too, right? Like, the game is not quite as much about card advantage as it used to be. It's more about like combos and what you can end on, but card advantage is still an important factor to the game. It's definitely something to still be mindful of. So yeah, it's funny, my opponent can see it before I can even actually get the Scythe lock off. But alright, yep, let's go ahead and look at the next one. Okay, so this game is going to be against Sword Souls, so it's always nice to get in good games against the new deck. And it's always nice to have an opponent with the same board. Okay, so we're going to take the first turn here, and our opening hand, aside from opening both Celestial and Dasher, is actually pretty nice here. We have the, what do you call it, the Torn Scales, plus a really good discard target in Jackalope, and then we have an Extender. So this is a pretty easy Rhongo hand, honestly. Again, we'll go over that in the combo guide tomorrow, or again, it should be tomorrow, if not tomorrow in a couple of days. But yeah, we'll go over that then, or this combo here, and how to spot when you can make Rhongo, and then how you can spot when you can go into other stuff as well. So, but yeah, what we're doing right now is fairly standard, you know, doing the Cherubini into the Rusty Bardish. Opponent does have the Imperm for the Bardish, which is definitely going to set you back. The Bardish is a pretty important effect to resolve. But that doesn't mean we're done necessarily, and that's actually going to be mostly thanks to our new support here. As you can see, now I'm going to pivot from going into a Rhongo play into a Scythe lock here. So I'm going to link into Dagda, right, because I know I can banish the Cloak to add the boots, then I can summon the Torn Scale, special the boots, and then I can overlay those into Levier, like I mentioned this earlier and during the deck profile itself, right? Now we get to activate Levier's effect, and doing so is going to trigger our Dagda search. That means we get to set the Scythe directly from our deck to the board, and then as a nice bonus, we also get to bring back Ancient Cloak, and we can use this effect to boost our Bardish's attack. And now we can overlay these two into Vert Anaconda. I like to keep the Levier around because if it survives into next turn, it's going to be a pretty good extender and just enable a bunch of plays here. And of course, now we're going to Vert. Again, it kind of hurts that we have to send them both from hand, but at least we're able to get the Scythe lock off here, So that's another reason why I really like having the Scythe in particular in addition to the DPE in this deck, because as you can see, it's really not hard to pivot into this play if one of your other plays gets stopped, and we even still ended with an extra Levier on board. Opponent does have the Lightning Storm here, which is kind of ironic because now that means I don't even have to use Scythe's or DPE's effect to trigger the Scythe, but the opponent's got the Called By for the Scythe, so no extra deck lock this time, but that's totally fine. We still have the DPE on the board for disruption here. Here's where the opponent reveals himself as a Sword Soul, using the emergence for the Taya here. But then, of course, I think they're just going to go ahead and concede because they realize they can normal summon Taya and try to banish the emergence from Grave. But of course, as soon as they summon the Taya, before they can even really use the effect, I'm just going to DPE and pop it. So, yeah, I really wanted to like this game here. This isn't the one I had in mind, but I really liked this game as an example of why I don't think the Dagda and Scythe are too cumbersome. Because even though it's one card in the main deck, the one card in the extra deck in particular is like, ooh, you do have to kind of go out of your way to make room for it. But again, this shows how it's not a play we always try to go into right away, but it's a good pivot oftentimes if one of our primary plays or one of our combos gets stopped, we can then just immediately go into, not immediately all the time, but usually we can just pivot into the Scythe lock pretty easily and still have a really, really good setup. So, all right, let's go ahead and watch the next game. Okay, so this next game is going to be against Dragon Maids, which is actually a deck I haven't played against in a while. And they, of course, like many other decks, have included the DPE engine as well. So we're taking the second turn, and we don't open any hand traps, so that's always pretty rough. But fortunately, our opponent just sets a card and passes, so that's pretty good. This hand is good, It's it's got the Dasher, but we do have the Torn Scales. I mean, I said good like it was alright, but we do have a Rhongo set up with a Call By, so can't complain too much, We've got the Torn Scales, Jackalope is a good card to discard, and then the Boots is an extender. That's one of the main things you can look for if you've opened Torn Scales in particular. Like, if you've got Torn Scales, a good card to discard, which is kind of vague, but we'll talk about it in the combo guide, and an extender, you can pretty easily go for Rhongo. But our opponent's one back row is actually a pretty devastating one. It's Super Poly, fusing both of our cards into Starving Venom, Fusion Dragon. So yeah, that's definitely not good. It's definitely not what I expected to see from a one card back row. I thought it was gonna maybe be like a Call By or something, but as you can see, that's not gonna stop us from having plays. We can still pretty easily go into the Cherubini. It's gonna cost us resources that we would ideally like to use later, but we can still combo your attempts to combo anyway. Really, as long as you can get this Brigandine out, you do have a good amount of plays. And Brigandine, as we'll talk a bit more about again in the combo guide, is like the key to this deck. This is like by and large the core card of the deck. So, yep, as you can see, we're going to set up a Wings in the Grave so that I can use its Banish and Revival effect to bring back Boots, and then I can go ahead and flip Brigandine to use that as a material. Now, flipping Brigandine allows me to summon the Silent or Stained Greaves. Most of the time, you actually want to go for a level 4 stained Greaves instead of keeping it level 3. But as you can see, I'm going to actually be setting up another Scythe lock here. So I'm going to leave it at level 3 so I can go into Levier. And as we can see, once again, I'm using Levier to trigger Dagda in order to set up the Scythe here. And then, of course, as always, we get the nice added bonus of being able to bring back the Ancient Cloak to power up the Bardish. Now, I do actually have to be pretty careful here because of the Star Venom's effect. And that's actually why I've gone into Appaloosa instead of going immediately into the Vert for the DPE here. I did this to set it up, the DPE later, but I'm not going into it now. And that's because of Starving Venom's this last effect here. If this fusion summon card is destroyed, you can destroy all of your opponent's special summon monsters. So that wouldn't be too bad if I went into that wouldn't be too bad if I went into DPE here, because really the only thing I'd be losing out on is my Bardish. But you know, we can still save our Bardish and not only negate this effect, but set up more negates if we just go into Appaloosa here. So I'm just gonna go ahead and do that. And yeah, I'll just move into battle phase. Now I can attack over the Starving Venom. Opponent's going to attempt to activate it, but we get to go ahead and Appaloosa in response. Like I said, we save our monster, our Bardish here, because, you know, not only is Bardish just good because of its 2,900 attack points, but on top of that, it's very likely to live through the next turn, and it's not going to stop us from going into DPE altogether. I know I talked about using Appaloosa as like a negates on my opponent's turn here, and to be honest, that might have been the smarter play, but, you know, I saw this line and I was like, I'm going to go for it. I can still set up a DPE Scythe lock here, and that's exactly what I ended up doing. So, again, it might have been smarter to just keep the 2 negate Appaloosa, but I don't know. I kind of wanted to be a bit flashy for this game here, so, but our opponent does have yet another Super Poly, so, you know, it's a bit of hubris on my part. If I had kept the Appaloosa, you know, our opponent wouldn't have been able, actually, would they have been able to summon this still? I don't think so, no, because I wouldn't have had a fusion monster. So yeah, my opponent actually just has the second Super Poly in, what, 6 cards? So, yeah, they're very, very lucky there. But that's alright, we still have the Fog Blade here. Opponent normal summons the Maxx in order to keep going into their plays here. So, yeah, the Fog Blade at the very least saved us some damage there. But now the opponent's going to go into their DPE. And, yeah, this is the game I really wanted to show, because this was a very nice back and forth where we kind of both end up, like, going all out and using all of our resources. So, things are not looking too great for me here. My opponent's got a DPE set up. I've got nothing but a lone Scythe on the board. That doesn't even really do much anymore because my opponent's already gone through all of their stuff. They don't have anything left in hand. But I do at the very least get to summon the Scythe, so that could potentially be useful as a material. But of course my opponent's going to DPE and just pop it, because the DPE will just come back during the standby phase anyway, so there's no reason not to pop it here. So, would have been a good material, but alas. It looks like we're just in top deck mode here, but things aren't actually as bad as they look if you remember all of our graveyard effects. Of course, our opponent's DP is going to come back, but, you know, we've got monster searches, spell trap searches, and more importantly, we've got the draw 2 from Celestial. And that's why I elected to special summon the Ash with the Dasher there. Not only that, but also Ash being a level 3 can enable a lot of plays here, like going into Breaksword. Breaksword is particularly good to go into here because it'll get destroyed by DPE, and then I can bring my 2 monsters back as level 4s. That's why I went into Breaksword. So now my opponents use their DPE for the turn, and I get to just go into, I still go into my normal summon, so I get to summon Tour Guide as well. So I was going to go into Bamboozling Gossip Shadow here, and then go into Rhongo, but I elected instead of just kind of, I was just like, whatever, I'll just end the game this turn. So I'm just going to go into Breaksword, and then raid for a little bit extra attack points, and then Raider's Knight overlay on top of the Raider's Knight into Arc Rebellion Xyz Dragon, which with its effect can provide far more than enough damage needed to end the game here. Well, not far more, it's just 700 points over, but yeah, I really liked this game. I really wanted to show this game off because this showed us using like everything in our arsenal. Actually, ironically, everything except for Rhongo. But as you can see, we were able to like pivot very easily from like an Appaloosa to stop a specific effect, and then into a Vert Scythe lock, and then even when our opponent had like the best possible answer, the second Super Poly to completely out our DPE Scythe lock, we still were able to then go into Arc Rebellion the next turn and just win anyway. So that's really the reason I like Phantom Knights so much. They're very, very resilient, very, very powerful. and they just have so many different very powerful lines of play. Like most decks, they have multiple lines of play, but usually if you go into one, it kind of pulls, you know, resources you used to go into the others, and the other lines lose a bit of steam. But with Phantom Knights, it's kind of like never runs out of steam. You just can pump out powerful monster after powerful monster. I love it. Okay, let's go ahead and watch another game here. Next game here is going to be against Dark Lord Despia, or Despia Dark Lord, I guess however you want to say it. Always a fun deck to play against. I imagine a fun deck to play with as well. Okay, so we're going second here. These Destiny heroes really love to gravitate towards my opening hand, but fortunately with Phantom Knights, you know, you usually don't need that many resources to combo off, so it's definitely not too bad that we open with the Dasher here. We do have the Maxx as well, so we can just, you know, get some amount of plays, or some amount of draws, some amount of cycling off our opponent's plays here to get us into more resources. But our opponent's got the Ash, so that's a bit of a yikes. So no special, or no drawing from these special summons for us. But despite that, we still have Jackalope, Tracker, and Silent Boots. So, I mean, we've got enough extenders, and actually our opponent just ends after playing this Indulged Dark Lord. So we got pretty lucky in that regard. Our opponent's going to pop off Maxx right away, which, again, I really don't usually recommend doing that, but we're just going to go ahead and play into it here, because honestly, I feel like if we just pass here, we're kind of just asking to lose. And we might not even lose right away, like we might not get OTK'd, but we're just asking for our opponent to have a setup that's going to be really hard for us to overcome. So I'd rather just play through Maxx in this case and just try to win on this turn. Especially because, honestly, I don't really expect my opponent to be... Okay, that's why I wanted to show this game, even though this is a very quick one and my opponent conceded right away. What I was just about to say is I didn't really expect my opponent to be playing Nibiru. Because, I don't know, I just had this inkling, like Dark Lord Despia, right? I don't know if that's a deck that can really fit Nibiru in, and honestly, if my opponent doesn't have Nibiru, what am I afraid of Maxx for? I've talked about this plenty of times when I mention having Nibiru in my deck, which ironically I don't have Nibiru, I think, in this deck because I don't have room for it, but I want to go ahead and show my opponent's deck list here, actually. Where is it? Right here. Because if we look at it, we can see there's no Nibirus in here. And that's kind of like solidified, you know, this was such good justification, or not justification, validation. I guess both, honestly, for me when I saw this. Because I was like, I knew it. I knew my opponent wouldn't have Nibiru. And I knew if they didn't have Nibiru, I didn't have anything to be afraid of if I played into their Maxx. Like, I might get stopped by like an Ash. Now, my opponent actually ended up only having one Ash. It actually only one Maxx for that matter. But even if my opponent had another Ash, that's only one negation. Phantom Knights are very, very resilient. If we get one effect Ash, like, it's really not that big of a deal. We can usually still find more plays pretty easily. So let this be a lesson. Let this be proof, like proof that of what I've been claiming all this time, which is if you're playing 3 Maxx, I mean, this person's only playing 1, but my point stands, if you're playing 3 Maxx, you need to be playing some kind of a follow-up threat from hand, like Nibiru, usually Nibiru, if not Nibiru, something else, but like usually Nibiru, in order to make sure that your opponent doesn't just kill you if they decide to take the Maxx challenge. Maxx is a good deterrent, but you need to have a threat to follow up with, because if you don't, then you're just all bark and no bite. So again, I know that was a short game, but I felt that was very, very important to highlight. So I do have one more game for us to check out here. Let's go ahead and watch that, and then after that we'll move to the outro. Last game of the video here is going to be against Pure Tri-Brigade. Let's take a look. Alright, this is a pretty good opening hand, actually. Opening the Brigandine isn't even that bad. Like, normally we like to set it with the Bardish, but yeah, opening it is definitely fine. We're going to open with Tour Guide here, but ooh, our opponent's got the Gamma here, which is definitely unfortunate, but not the end of the world, because we still have plenty of stuff here. I'm going to set the Brigandine so I don't end up discarding it with Tsuchinoko. And unfortunately, we discard Tracker, which is like the one we really didn't want to discard. We could, if we discarded Tsuchinoko or the Torn Scales, would have been fine, but no, we discarded the Tracker. But luckily, my opponent does not really have a follow-up here. They just have a couple of back rows, which is still a little bit scary, but you know, we at the very least have plays. I'm going to go ahead and try to set up my Grave with Torn Scales. My opponent's got the Ash here. So, you know, unfortunately we don't get to send something from deck to grave, but we did at least get to summon the Tsuchinoko that we discarded. And now we can pivot into Cherubini to try to start some plays here. I am anticipating like an Imperm or a Call By here. Yep, here's the Call By, so our opponent's going to be able to negate this Graff here. I think this Call By could have been used a little bit better, potentially. I'm trying to think actually if there would have been a better point later down the line to use it, but fortunately because that Tsuchinoko survived, we are actually still able to go into Rusty Bardish here, and our opponent just concedes at that point as you know, most people can kind of recognize that once Rusty Bardish hits the board, then the game, it's not like over at that point, but Rusty Bardish very, very much the cornerstone of the deck, and if Rusty Bardish resolves, you like literally always have plays. There's even with just 2 level 3 monsters and nothing else, like even like a Jackalope and I don't know, like a ME teleport. If those are your only starters in your opening hand, you can still go into Rusty Bardish with that, and from there, depending on what you bring back, you can still make like a 3 material Appaloosa from that Rusty. Like Rusty Bardish is so important to the deck, and very important to recognize that, I guess, like our opponent did. So, all right, let's go ahead and go on to the outro. Okay, so that's going to do it for those games there. You know, it's funny, I didn't even realize when I started this video and saved all those, when I saved all those replays that actually not even one of those games do we even need to go into Rhongo. So even though this deck can set up the good old Rhongo lock there, we can see that it's definitely not necessary, as this deck is capable of doing even more disgusting things with the good old DPE Scythe lock. So, yeah, it's funny, you know, it's just, like, this deck, as much as I love Phantom Knights, it's just, like, this deck is the one that always ends up putting out the most disgusting end boards, like, the most disgusting board locks. I kind of love it, though. I can't deny it. I very much like the Phantom Knights deck, and if you guys want to see more Phantom Knight games, do let me know, because I am always down to play this deck. This is, like, you know, this along with, you know, I'd say Prank Kids, Trizu, Sword Soul, and Adamanspators. The 5th slot's kind of contested, but those are probably my top 5 favorite decks to play. Ooh, I should do that. I should, let me know if you want to see that video. My top 5, like, favorite decks to play in Master Duel. I mean, I kind of just said what most of them were, but of course we could go into more detail about them and why I like them and why they're so powerful and all that fun stuff. Ooh, I'm glad I had that. I'm glad I said that. So, yeah, let me know in the comments if you want to see that. And let me know in the comments if you have any suggestions for the deck or any other kind of videos you want to see or anything in general. Because, as always, I love hearing from you guys in the comments. You guys are really good about giving constructive criticism and good feedback. I have one of the best comment sections on YouTube. I really do. I genuinely mean that. Like, my comments are awesome. You guys are awesome. So, thank you very much from the bottom of my heart. But... and thank you for watching to the very end of the video like this. That is a great help to me. I hugely appreciate that. And if you feel like subscribing, that's obviously the best way to get notifications of when I post. But as long as you're viewing, again, to the end of the video like this, that's all that I ask. Or that's more than I could ask even. So I thank you. All right, without further ado, I'm just going to go ahead and sign off. This is Xlex. Hope you have a fantastic day.